What does it take to make workshops work? How can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on a mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show are, believe it or not, 73 guests. Not all of them have grabbed the mic and actively contributed to the show, but at least they used the chat. Because this was an experiment as part of the virtual collaboration campus that every participant was invited to join. What came out was a beautiful conversation about what it is that makes virtual collaboration and virtual workshops work. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, lean back, enjoy the show, and then visit workshops.work to download my one-page summary. Enjoy the show. My name is Miriam. I'm hosting a podcast on workshop facilitation, and the name of the podcast is Workshops Work. When I got invited to host a session on this virtual collaboration campus, I was thinking, what should I talk about? And then one of the collaborators, Mary Alice, she came up with the idea, why don't you talk about podcasting? And then I thought, okay, talking about podcasting is one thing, but hosting a podcast is another. So why not recording an episode and inviting all the participants of the campus to join me for a conversation about virtual collaboration and virtual workshops. So our question today is, what makes virtual workshops work? And you are all invited to join this conversation. So this is being recorded, and I will not use the video of it, but only the audio. And I will release it as one podcast episode. How does that feel?
It feels fantastic, Miriam.
Wonderful. Anyone who has concerns?
Not at all.
Yay, I like that spirit. Okay, so the big struggle, the big challenge of this is, how can we make sure that we have a structured conversation, a meaningful conversation among how many people are in the call? Co-pilot Tanya?
67.
67 people. Okay. So I think we're gonna end in the Guinness Book of Records to have hosted a podcast episode, a conversation with 67 people, right? How are we gonna do that? We need awareness of ourselves and of the group, and to make sure that only one person speaks at the time, or that there's only conversation, that we don't speak over each other. So one idea is just mute yourself and unmute yourself when you want to speak. The more daring part, and maybe after half an hour into the show we can try that we all unmute ourselves and see what pops out. But we can grow into this experience. Then I would like you to raise your hand if you want to speak and put any question that you would like to ask in the chat. And I would be very happy if you help me to keep an eye on all of that, because that's a lot of multitasking. Before we start, I would like to do a check-in. And with 67 people, it's a lot, it's difficult. And I experienced that from workshops, we are more likely to speak up and to participate if we have spoken at least once before. So what we will do now is we'll send you into breakout rooms with one person that you don't know. 72 people. Yay, definitely Guinness Book of Record. Thank you, Laure. So we'll send you into breakout rooms with one other person. And I would like you to, each of you has 90 seconds to speak. So someone starts with 90 seconds speaking. You don't interrupt, you just listen. After 90 seconds, I will send you a little message from the off, and you receive appreciative feedback for what you have said for 30 seconds. And then you switch roles, 90 seconds of speaking for the other person, a short appreciative feedback, and then I invite you to come back in and we will start with the conversation. How does that sound? If you agree and you think it's great, then unmute yourself and say, hell yes.
Hell yes.
Hell yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Great.
Yes.
So we'll send you into the breakout rooms. Sit tight, smile, and don't forget to start in the breakout room with a smile and a hello. Bye-bye. So now everyone should be back. And I would say let's kick off the show. So if you feel comfortable enough to unmute yourself and just to pop up and pop in, then do so. I have total trust. Otherwise, mute yourself, raise your hand, and we will make sure that it's going to be your turn. So let me start with Brigitte, since you're sitting right next to me on my screen. Brigitte, for you, what makes virtual workshops work?
Well, when I was just getting outside for 10 minutes, because I was pretty aware that what is really difficult is to be hosting like 6 hours in a row. So virtual, digital, online, whatever, spatial workshops work when you're really able to host yourself. So when I was getting outside, bit of sun, I came up with the ABC just in a moment. And I thought the ABC could be, the A would be the art of hosting. So what art of hosting is in the on-prem world could be definitely also, or is for me, true for the online and digital realm. So Mary Alice was one of the role models yesterday and the day before to display, to live into this art of hosting others and first ourselves. So checking the art of hosting out is something that is really helpful. And one thing there is also never facilitate alone. So to have a team to buddy up, I'd say is really important. And if it could be even more than 2 for a group of more than 70 right now is even more helpful. And to have somebody like Tanya or Ute that are on the tech part really supporting the whole thing. The B would be yourself. Because this always helps. It helps in the on-prem, it helps in the real world, and it helps even more, I'd say, out here. When we had our session now on Alice in Wonderland, you were pretty much yourself. It got a bit messy, but you were yourself. I don't know you that much, but I felt that you were behaving as you would be behaving all time. And the C for me would be the communication part. So be aware of the language you use, of having really a participatory approach as you are displaying right now. So get people into really speaking up first, maybe in a smaller part, in a smaller group. Make sure that they have breakout rooms so people can get their heads around. And Zoom is really enabling small and larger breakout rooms. So it's all about the art of hosting, being yourself and communicating, and let communicate. Be an invitation to speak up.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Brigitte. I like the being yourself part. I always say that I have to be myself because all the others are taken already, right?
Yeah. So where's the
Tanya, what makes virtual workshops work for you?
Having so many people that you can connect to so much more intimately than at live workshops. So as a speaker, for instance, or at a conference type of thing, when you have a large audience, you can only engage with a fraction of them. And to be honest with you, I personally feel that I've engaged with so many more people here, whether on the campus or through LinkedIn or in small conversations in the chat box. So I personally think that this is a great format. And just to pick up on Brigitte's, tiring without a doubt, but equally exhausting to face-to-face conferences and workshops. They exhaust me too, but it's the amount of energy you put into them, I suppose. So I think virtual workshops rock, not just work, they rock.
Joanna.
Yes, me too. I have the personal ABC, so to say, Brigitte. So actually my A is your B, authenticity. And this is also something we can encourage in the virtual space as well. So the people don't try to, show off or, to be somebody they are not, but really to admit all of us, we are teachers and learners at the same time. So this ecology of learning, which is really important, and that we can learn from each other and we can obviously, also communicate at the meta level. So if the communication doesn't work, really to say, okay, you are not reacting because you haven't understood the question, you are not in the mood to answer the question, or you need a little bit more of whatever encouragement. And or you are facing technical difficulties, also possible in the virtual space, yeah? So really the meta level and the authenticity to admit that there is the communication gap and what is the reason behind, for example. Another point, building relations. And I'm pretty sure that it's not about the generational issue. It's not about the generation X, Y, Z, digital natives or not. It's really about motivation and commitment. So when we are talking about building relations, it's really important that we are thinking all the time how we can actually send the virtual smile. If we don't have the camera on, there are plenty of possibilities to send the virtual smile and the virtual hug to other people who need them in this special moment. And another point, the C, is the cross-cultural awareness. Many of us, we work across cultures. And sometimes when people don't contribute in the virtual meetings, it's not the point that they have nothing to share, or they have nothing to say, or they haven't got any opinion, just other way around. We really need to be sensible regarding the cultural settings to encourage, and above all, to be a good facilitator and a good host, so that people really feel they are in the psychological safety, and that every voice, every opinion is welcome, and it takes time.
Thank you. I would like, yes, Daniela, please unmute yourself.
So what works in a digital workshop and what does not work? I will start with what does not work. It doesn't work that you don't have the food and the drinks that you share together, and you don't have, that experience of maybe having some food or drinks that are related to the topic of your workshop, and those really nice chats at the coffee table. But what works, on the other hand, is the fireside chats. That's amazing. The concept was just amazing right now. So you can have those really small one-to-one conversations. So that's amazing. And from a facilitator's perspective, what I really liked is the dictatorship of building breakout groups just the way you want. There is no discussion. You build breakout groups the way the software wants to mingle the people.
Yeah.
To stick to that point, you cut out a lot of intro and a lot of other things because you need to stick to the point. So I feel that digital workshops must be really much shorter and really to the point, so you can really save a lot of time. And from a participant's perspective, it's amazing how you can jump into those private chats with someone you thought said something really nice that in a workshop environment, you don't want to bother anyone else, right? So you hold that thought until the coffee break. But in a virtual workshop as a participant, you can actually do it. And then to jump back to the facilitator, what I like is that you have this context of your participants from, where they're sitting in their room or maybe their background picture, that gives you this impression of contextual inquiry. So you can actually really jump in the worlds of your participants and make some assumptions or relate to that. So yeah, a lot of positive things there.
Wonderful. I would like to pick up one thing that you mentioned, which is the virtual backgrounds. And maybe someone wants to answer, what do you think about showing the personal kind of private background versus having an artificial background or a green screen? Who would like to speak? Raise your hand or just unmute yourself and pop up.
Hi, this is Christina. Oh, who's that? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I must say I like to follow because I was in the LinkedIn discussion already on the one you had in LinkedIn. And now here, I think it's for me nice to see both, to see the green screen. But in fact, Brigitte, you bring flowers and a wine glass. So I really like to see the background of people. So for me, I like it. So, and I can deeply understand when people say they don't want to show their backgrounds if they have to work in maybe in the sleeping room or so. A person said, I don't want everybody to see my bedroom. What I really liked, I think it was Yannis, that you have those photos. I mean, maybe you can share later, but I really like the concept of your backgrounds. So I like to see the personal backgrounds. Thank you. Hand over.
So maybe I'll add, this is Tosca. I don't like them so much. I understand that sometimes they're highly practical for reasons that Christine has already mentioned, but I find it a bit artificial. And I also don't like visually how the head is transposed artificially on the background. And there's something plastic about it that I do not like myself, but that might be personal.
Who disagrees? Unmute yourself.
I neither agree nor disagree. I would suggest that we can also use it in a very playful way. I did it once with a check-in, so that I said, okay, everyone, we are in different home offices at the moment. So, of course, it's up to you if you are using your camera or not. Nevertheless, it's really cool just to think of a place you would like to be currently, and to use the picture of such a place, and also to share with the group why. And this was really very, very powerful, because that way there were people, for example, of Italian origin or of the US origin who are based in Germany currently. And they said, oh, you know, I have my family over there, so I really would like to be with them. Or I'm just, you know, having a look at the media coverage regarding the Italy. This is what obviously occupies me a lot. And I really am with my heart with the people in Rome. That's why I'm displaying the Colosseum in the background, you know. So actually you can be very playful with those backgrounds and really use it as an intervention as well.
Wonderful. Andreas?
Yes, so it provides us more possibilities to display ourselves. And so for me, it's quite important that you do it consciously. So you really are aware what all the others see. And you can say, yes, that's what I like to display myself. Or even with a branded background, like we just had the workshop with Holger about the improv theater. And he had a huge theater in his background. And so that works very, very well. And sometimes if you are not really conscious and it's a very disturbing or background, it's hard to focus. So for me, it's a thing you definitely have to consciously deal with.
Yeah, thank you. Tanya?
I also have to say that it's not just a question of what other people want, it's a question of what I want. So to be honest with you, having now stood in front of a camera for the last 4 days for I don't know how many hours on end, having the background behind me that I need, so I do a lot of hiking, I like to be outdoors, this is all restricted now, and just having that picture behind me, I can feel the air. I always use my own pictures because they all have an emotional context for me, and I can feel the air coming in through this window because I took this picture, I know where it is, I know what it felt like, and this is what gives me the energy to keep going. So it's also personal preference.
Thank you. I see lots of thumbs. Kerstin?
Hey, I have to share a story of someone who has his own face picture as a background, so nobody realizes when he's gone.
How does it feel? Christina?
No, sorry, I was just laughing. I found the idea perfect. Thank you.
You may unmute yourself to share a laugh. I would like to come back to a question that was sent to me by Rebecca on my Ask for Questions Food for Fish. And she asked, what do we actually need? What kind of workshops can we only do in the analog world that we cannot do in the virtual space?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I've been struggling with is that I do a lot of plastic arts. So when you want to have people contribute to a mutual sculpture or a mutual painting or developing something out of cut paper or whatever, the result will never be combined unless you make arrangements to do that somehow by the mail. But I think that's been a thing that it's really struggling with in my mind, because those are the connections that are not necessarily verbal. And I'm sure there are other ways to do it online, but to actually combine them physically in the same space, you can't do it.
Mm. What I find interesting about the silence, and I might misinterpret the silence, it's either because you don't feel comfortable to speak up, or it's actually quite difficult to imagine now, after 2 weeks being locked into the virtual world, to imagine what actually cannot be replicated in the virtual. And I wonder to what extent we might have answered in a different way only 2 weeks ago. Daniela.
I was thinking maybe it's because you're recording and everyone is so quiet.
Okay, that's a very good point.
Yeah, but about the question, so what is not possible in a virtual environment? I think it's basically the type of workshops that are maybe kind of a training/workshop where you expose people to completely new content, where you teach them completely new skills. And I think for that type of difficulty, where you teach, coach at the same time in a workshop environment, in an interactive experiential learning way, it might be not suited to make a virtual workshop.
Thank you.
What I would say is I can hardly imagine to have a simulation, like in a intercultural simulation, you have two groups and both are interacting, or you're having some dice games as a simulation, people doing something together. I think this has some limitation.
Sarah?
Well, something I'm thinking about is, and I think it's wonderful, everything that we're doing, everything that we're discovering, but I've had a version of this question so often now, is there anything we can't do online? Out of all the things that we usually do, can't we do them online? And sometimes I wonder, well, should we? Because I think we're very fast. We are, as humans, I think, evolutionarily, we are adaptation machines. We are powerhouses of adaptation, and we get used to this new normal that, a few months ago would have been a nightmare to all of us. And we're adapting, and it's beautiful, and we're finding great ways to interact and to stay connected, and it's wonderful. I'm loving every minute of it, but I still sometimes pause and think, well, should we really think about every version of something online, or should we also maybe really think, no, this is something I don't want to do online, this is something I want to do out in the real world?
I see a few thumbs up. Thank you for sharing. Annette?
I do security trainings, and we do a lot of role play. Like, for example, we have a checkpoint situation, and there's participants who play the security guards, and then there's participants who sit in a car, and then the situation gets a bit difficult, and then they have to interact, and afterwards we debrief, and we realize what how they felt in their roles, and whether they had other options of how to deal with the situation and stuff like this. And I cannot imagine how you can do something like this online, and it's a crucial part of these kind of trainings. Oh, someone has an idea, Brigitte? You do?
Yeah, I was asking myself, because we do those trainings also in the academy, and I saw people that were running away because they had their on-premise workshop going on, and we also had a virtual reality experience there. And for the time being, at least when it's not possible to do this on site, I thought it could be an option to do that, because you could have quite an experience, and they also call it the empathy booster, because then depending on what you put on there, it really could help you. And I even so thought of having some VR augmented reality things to also have something on empathy for leaders, because they sometimes lack exactly that. So I thought, well, have a movie where the thoughts of your employees pop up, or all the opportunities you could be seeing, just to get them into the mood for something. So it's not what you're saying, but it's at least maybe something that we could be exploring. So maybe somebody has experiences with it.
Ellen?
Yeah, my comments build on yours, Bess, around physically building an artifact together that requires combination. Usually when I'm in a workshop mode, it's because the client or the group has an output that they need to co-create that can't be done kind of individually and just adding it up all together. So it's an iterative approach where you might have subgroups working off in parallel on the same question, and then they bring their artifacts with their round one outputs together. And then there's a synthesizing process, which at some point ends up a little bit like you're working with plastics example, Bess, where it needs to come together, and it's either a bunch of post-it notes that are either rearranged, or there's a flip chart that gets edited to be the master one. I think all of that, or a bunch of that stuff, could be done, but it's the pace and energy that you can do within a workshop where you're moving the artifacts around and you kind of feel physical energy as you build. And my worry trying to replicate that online, so there's a little bit back to the should we question, is whether the technology manipulation of the data basically overtakes and we lose ourselves in process over the content of what the group is aiming to produce. Others might have experiences of doing that type of workshop really successfully. And would Bess, are you looking to comment?
Yeah, I think there's also, as you mentioned, it's all of it coming together. There's a force field around that. The energy of things coming together, and also the acceleration toward the end when you're getting close to the solution. And that's a thing, I'm sure that's replicable online, but in many cases I'm building things that people have to then take the thing that they built and teach somebody else how to build it. And without the physical material, the lesson is lost. I mean, it's simply not as effective a lesson. Now, again, we could just be teaching other lessons or find other ways to teach those lessons. But my personal skill is building stuff. So it's frustrating to think, okay, I might have to abandon the thing that brought me into this in the first place. But, I'm not opposed to thinking about it. But I would love for somebody brilliant, maybe Alan and I can get together and be the brilliant ones who think of it, how to turn that into something, find a way to do it. I don't know what it is yet, but...
Feel connected. Simon.
Yes, thank you, Miriam. I just wanted to make sure that Sarah's comment didn't go amiss, and she didn't just see all the chats that came through. And I just wanted to thank her for bringing that one up, because it's amazing how, because of what's going on right now, how everybody thinks everything needs to go virtual. All the cameras are sold out, all the microphones are sold out, all the screens are sold out because everybody wants to go virtual. I think it's for us, as you know, Miriam, we're physical, we're more than physical, we're in the room. So we need to have a version of what we do, and I think it works. But then again, sometimes I think, but do it? So I just wanted to call out Sarah and verbalize my thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Do you ever feel you're tired of the trip from home to the home office? Do the physical confines of your house are not getting you the exposure to the new ideas that you need? Maybe you need Mastermind. At Mastermind, you work together with a group of peers who help you bring new perspectives to your challenges, to find new solutions, and who you can even give a little bit back to by helping them solve their problems. In a compressed 2 hours, you'll get a day's worth of learning. So why don't you get out of that box and come to Mastermind? Workshops.work/mastermind.
I would like to bring the conversation now to another level, and I would like to try out two things. One is, what if you're all, given that it's not very noisy in your background, that you all unmuted yourself, and that we'll just try this popcorn conversation, because I think it will be more dynamic, and I don't feel very comfortable in the role in unmuting people and calling out people. So if you want to join the conversation, just unmute yourself and join whenever you feel ready, and be respectful. And I would like to throw the question into the fishbowl. What can you imagine that comes out on the other side of this crisis? So what is it that we as facilitators, as society, what can we learn? What have we already learned? And what is it that we can learn that makes leadership organizations a better place in the future?
The importance of connecting, showing people you care. I'm hoping that will stay. And also the benefits to the planet on our new way of being. I'm hoping they will stay.
I would say that the control, those organizations which have still high levels of control, command and control, they have to change afterwards, because now giving more freedom by trusting people to work in their home offices, once they come back into the office, I believe they will not be happy to go back to that command and control or more hierarchical system. So I think the agile, it will give a push to agile leadership and agile work methods.
I think a shift from leader-follower paradigm to leader-leader paradigm.
What do you understand by a leader?
Well, we're all leaders. Self-regulation, self-organizing, having a voice. And instead of having what Isabel just mentioned, the leader-follower, in order to be a leader, you have to have followers. And it's been in an autocratic sense, or it still is now. And that might shift to where we close that gap and we become leader, eye to eye.
Again, sorry to bring in maybe a critical or a pausing perspective, but I'm just wondering, I think it is important to keep in view that when we're talking about, people becoming leaders, we are still talking about a very small subset of the world's population, which is those of us who are lucky enough to be sitting in front of computers, participating in virtual conferences right now. And that's not everybody. And I think it's wonderful, because we are probably the people who need to be changing our lifestyles and mindsets most. But I'm just wondering what it means also that, we, in a very wide sense, are undergoing this massive revolution, which could have very positive outcomes, but not all of us are. So I'm just wondering, what will that mean that, a part of the world's population will undergo this drastic paradigm shift in mindset, working methods. Again, some people saying it might be the end of capitalism. I wouldn't go that far. But, still, it's not all of the world. Maybe, I don't know, I haven't thought about this much, but maybe somebody else has thoughts on this.
How can our facilitation skills help us to make this process of learning easier and also more integrative? Thank you for bringing up this critical voice. I think it's very important. So, how can we facilitate?
If I may add to what Sarah is saying right now, I think that we do think about ourselves like first movers, and I think, of course, you have to be smart, you have to keep yourself in the business. But I also agree there's like 80% of the population, I always say, they don't really have access to many of these things. And also, I think a lot of the electronic gadgets, they have a huge, carbon footprint and also a huge human footprint, because electric devices, they need a lot of input from specific minerals and things that actually have cost wars in Africa, or depletion of minerals around the world. There's a lot of human slavery, to produce many of these artifacts. So I think we also need to think of those issues, Of course, for people who travel a lot for conferences, sometimes it's better to stay at home, because then, you're not really helping the environment. But you also need to think about being inclusive. How are you going to give access to these tools to a lot of people, which is the majority in the world that has so much poverty?
And I do think, and at the moment, I see so much solidarity, especially within our country. I don't know whether it's the same like internationally, but I see a lot of solidarity at the moment. People opening up their wisdom, they are connecting, they are sharing, they are innovating. And I wonder how long this will stay, and I hope it stays, not in the crisis only, but also afterwards.
I feel this situation opens us up, for sure. Each of us returning to an office, I think many will really appreciate and honor the connection and contact, especially having the contact again. And knowing, we have been talking about AI and what will be possible through all the devices. Being human will make a big difference. And I find it interesting to also consider, what about those people who don't or weren't distracted by all the devices? What do they still have that others might have lost? So
a friend of mine just said, I hope the internet also breaks down. And I was, oh my God, please do not hope for that. But that would be an interesting, it would be an interesting experience in the...
That will be extremely disruptive, yes.
Yes.
I would like to go back to Sarah's point around leadership and Miriam's question around leadership, because we talk about leadership as a whole, but what I hope is emerging is in contrast to the formal leadership, there's a social leadership that might be emerging. And when we talk about social leadership and how we as facilitators can help infuse our leaders with this concept around having a voice and even the silent voices, hearing them. I think it becomes an opportunity to have the emergence of a different type of leadership and give us the freedom and also the task to talk about it during and work around that. So opposing formal and social leadership in my mind, to answer your question.
And also maybe to bring up the point that Charlotte mentioned before about self-leadership. And I have the impression, or for me at least, it felt that being in this virtual world, suddenly I'm just by myself. Nobody sees me struggle. And usually I'm the kind of person, I just go into a situation, I don't know anything, I pick up things, but just observing and asking and finding my way around. And now behind the screen, if I don't become active asking people for help, nobody will even realize how much I struggle. So I think it's really the opportunity also to go out and to prove self-leadership by asking for help, by showing vulnerability and reaching out and starting to collaborate.
And to take that point from you, Miriam, is also what I hope is that everybody remembers how vulnerable we are. And not go out of this situation and in months later everybody has forgotten that this can happen.
Miriam, it feels a little bit like being part of the Plateau Cave, you know. And regarding your comment on the personal leadership, self-leadership, I think is really crucial because all of us, we are experiencing right now how important resilience actually is and how important the ethical questions are. So this is something that hopefully will change after the disruption right now, that people are going to self-reflect much more, us included, not them, but all of us, and also ask more and more ethical questions. So everything what is going on right now in the health system, it doesn't really matter what country. It shows definitely that we need more and more ethical involvement and really more focus on the humanity. So to say, if we want to experience the second Renaissance, we need to really put time and energy in building and maintaining human relations.
So question into the fishbowl. What kind of rules do we need in order to, let me phrase it differently. I had a recent conversation with Gustavo Razzetti, who was on the show on episode 25. And he said something interesting, that we are moving from the global economy to the global society. And the problem is that with global economy, we have very specific rules and we have currency, which give us orientation and guidelines on how to behave. So to pick up on your point, Joanna, what are the currencies or the guidelines, rules, ethics that we need in order to thrive in the social society?
Yeah, I actually may challenge that a little bit because I think, for a lot of analysts, they say it's the death actually of globalization. So there's also that option somehow, the world may become more local. People need to be local resilience. It also doesn't make a lot of sense if you are this global citizen, but then in the context that you live and you experience your daily life, that you're so detached from that. And then, we also need to think about maybe we will have this super global world or global society, or maybe not this super local society as before, but maybe I think there's going to be, a lot of outcomes are going to be hybrids, whether in the workplace. Now we know people have, personal lives. So maybe they can bring their personal life more to the workplace, and also in terms of the global society. I think it's going to be a hybrid now.
Just trying to connect to what was mentioned in the previous question about the inequality or the gap that might be building between the ones that are transforming and not, and then this question about what will be the rules. I think overall, as facilitators, we'll have to be even more, pay more attention of what's the context in which we are trying to participate, because maybe in some areas, and especially from what I have seen in these different sessions, in some areas, some organizations, some people are ready to join whatever is the new world. In some other areas, it's not going to be the situation. Some other areas will start from a much more depressed, much more unequal, much more left behind situation. So I think as facilitators, it's great to be motivated and have this inner drive to transform and to be optimistic. But we need to be very aware of what is the context, because not every context is going to be as optimistic, as engaged, or as connected. So we will have to adapt our speech a lot.
So I would like to challenge that, because I think that optimism can bring new ideas in the place. So if we are looking around us and we see the reality and economy is going down, what would be the alternative to optimism? So what would be the better reaction or the better style of facilitation, according to you?
Not necessarily change optimism as such, just to be aware that maybe, for example, the way that we address one community that is already, for example, one organization that already has the values to be collaborative, to be transformational, maybe that's definitely not going to be the case in another situation. So it's not that we have to change our optimism, just to change the way that we materialize it, possibly. Because a lot of communities might be maybe very depressed. So I believe that the process will be a lot more gradual in some areas. I guess it's my call to adapt our views to whatever we are going to find, which we don't know what we are going to find.
So for me, the future is very much uncertain. One of my objectives joining this forum is actually try to interact with different people and see how they will see the future unfold. And I'm talking about the social ties, social relations, economies, companies, corporations, our roles as facilitators, consultants, etc. And actually, I have been battling for the past 3 weeks in order to find my role, or to find a kind of an opportunity to jump on or learn something so that I can evolve and adapt to the situation that is happening around. Nonetheless, at the end of the session, and I thank you, Miriam, for this beautiful idea, which is the fishbowl, I come to a realization of two things in particular. The first one is that I can never understand or see how people will behave when we go out of this, and how long is it going to remain, or how short is it going to last. The second thing, there are some ugly, I don't say values, I cannot call them principles, but things that are governing our interaction. You know what I mean? Our is like everybody, wherever they exist. This is related to influence, power, greed, etc., whatsoever you want to call it. Yes, we are fragile at the moment as human beings, and we're connecting to each other, trying to talk, share emotions, share whatsoever. But as soon as things goes back into normal, I wish and I hope that this social bonding would continue and overcome what we call greed or influence or dominance or leadership, probably in our language. Will the relationship between different people differ? Will we attain this kind of social maturity to be able to realize that our cooperation or relation or our interaction is much more important than whatsoever technology or money or whatsoever you want to call it that is placed on the table? I don't know. I'm uncertain. One thing for sure, I'm much comfortable now dealing with this uncertainty. I cannot say I'm not scared. Yes, I am. I'm very scared actually, but more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing, Jamil.
Thank you.
And I think you gave us enough food for thought to reflect on. And I think it would be a shame to over discuss this point and to just maybe sit for a moment with our own insecurities and maybe with our own hopes for a better future and what we learned from the campus about virtual collaboration, about making strong and deep connections despite the screen between us and despite the cultural differences. So shall we just take maybe a few seconds to sit with it and to be grateful that we're in the space where we can have this conversation with 70 people with a similar mindset. I would like to thank you for your engagement, for this meaningful conversation, for making this experiment working. I'm very happy. I have the impression that it was more structured with 70 people than with 11. I would like to invite you, so we created a Slack channel just spontaneously to have an opportunity to continue conversations because our time is kind of up. I put the link into the chat. Yeah, I think there are many nuggets that we revealed during this hour. And you might have met your virtual collaboration campus buddy in this kind of hiccup-driven check-in session, but maybe you want to continue the conversation. So thank you very much. Maybe you can all unmute yourself and just applaud yourself for being a podcast show guest and high five. Why not doing a real one? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone has...
Thank you, Miriam.
Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well done, Miriam. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.